the possibility of gold becoming the backing of another currency sometime down the line, would that like what exactly kind of
I
do
don't
you
know if it'll be a backing. I think it may be the actual
the
currency.
actual currency?
I
Okay.
think you may look, and that's one thing I will also tell people is what I tell my people. If you're going to buy gold, as I recommend, don't buy big bars. Okay, buy small quantities that can be broken down because if you really do need it for a currency, nobody's going to make change for 100 ounce bar of gold. Okay, I mean, you may think that I'm goofy, but you got to think like that. You have to have scrap silver because, again, if we really get into that position, and I think there's a chance you can get into that position, okay, then you're going to need to be able to use that to buy food potentially. And again, I don't want anybody to think I'm calling the end of the world. Okay, I just want to be prepared, and my gold and my silver, I know is going to appreciate whether I need to use it as a currency or not. I know in my safe it's going to appreciate. So when I drop that and I leave it to my kids, they can go sell it.
Hey guys, welcome back to Capital Cosm. Today we've got Todd Horwitz back on the show. Todd, thank you so much for coming back on, my friend.
Always a pleasure to be on. Great show.
Fantastic. Well, guys, I'd like to remind you to hit that subscribe button if you're getting value out of these videos. 85% of you guys who watch this content are not subscribed. And it takes less than a second. So hit that subscribe button, like the video if you enjoy this content. All right, Todd, let's just go ahead and dive right in. What is kind of like your 30,000 foot view of the markets, the economy, everything right now? Let's start off macro, and then we can kind of hone in on specific topics.
Well, the economy sucks. I mean, let's be honest. The inflation is way too high. No matter what numbers they report to us, the consumer is struggling. If you're in the middle class and below, you are definitely in a recession. They won't admit to the fact that we're in a recession, but we're in a recession. I mean, people cannot afford to live. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They are consuming debt like it was nothing. They must think they're like the government, that they don't have to pay it back. So, I mean, from an economy standpoint, I think we're in a lot of trouble. I think that our farmers are in a lot of trouble because the input of our production is higher than the output of what they can sell it at. That's another issue, but nobody addresses that. We keep worrying about a rate cut. The only time a rate cut's coming is when we go into a depression or a recession that they admit to, or the banks once again are in trouble, which we're very close considering that over 600 regional banks say that they're in trouble, which means there's probably 1,200 plus the big banks.
Yeah. What are some other metrics of weakness that you're seeing out there? You mentioned
Well, I mean,
anything else?
the consumer can't. The jobs stink. Let's start with the jobs, okay? Because
Sure.
that's how we earn our living. Since 2021, 66% of the jobs that have been created have gone to illegal aliens. Okay, 33% have gone to Americans, and 50% of the 33% has gone to government jobs. Government does not produce money. Government produces debt. We, the taxpayer, get to pay all those employees that they keep adding to the payroll. The federal government was never meant to be the largest employer in the world. We're seeing layoffs everywhere. We're seeing a lot of things destroyed in this country. And of course, the small business guy doesn't have a chance anymore.
Right. I think the number is what, 30% of the economy now is government, is public sector. It comes from the public sector, something along those lines. I mean, you've got to ask yourself.
Way too high. Again, the federal government, if you look at the Constitution, if anybody actually would take the time to read the Constitution, it says that government is run city, county, state, and the federal government is supposed to oversee, not be the largest employer in the world.
Yeah. And then you have to ask yourself the question, which sector is more capable of allocating resources more effectively? Is it the government or is it the private sector?
It's certainly the private sector. The private sector is where you make money. Look, they're trying to turn us into communist, socialist, or Marxist. You pick the one you want. They're trying to take us away from capitalism. And that's why you see all these big donors and all the big money floating to the side that says, hey, let's screw the middle class. Let's screw the small business. Let's destroy anybody who wants the opportunity to start in a garage, as Steve Jobs did, or Jeff Bezos did, or anybody else who built a big business from nothing. That is no longer really possible for the small guy because of all the regulations. And don't kid yourself. Google and Meta went to the government and asked for regulations because they wanted to eliminate competition. You eliminate competition in this world, you are paving the way to pay higher prices for lousier goods.
Yeah, I think this is a conundrum that most people, especially on the left, fall into. They end up supporting the very people that they're supposedly up against. Because I mean, you look at their top supporters, behind all these movements, all these big tech companies, these big corporations, everything like that. So it kind of boggles the mind.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Let me.
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
No, I mean, again, this is exactly what's happening. So you're seeing, remember, in a communist environment or a socialist environment, the rich love it because they always benefit, versus the middle class and below, they get tortured. And we can go back into being serfs once again, because that's where we're headed. If we continue to go over this globalization, and we allow the squad, for example, with their idea of what it should be about, we're not going to be in good shape. You're going to destroy any real opportunity to have the American dream or the American life that I grew up in and that my parents brought in. And of course, this is what happens when you get fat and lazy, which is why most empires fail at between 200 and 300 years.
Yeah, and this isn't a recent phenomenon either. I mean, I have a book back here somewhere. It's called Wall Street and the Bolsheviks, and it basically details and writes an account of how Wall Street funded the Bolshevik Revolution and the Soviet Union as well. So, I mean, these guys have been doing it for quite a while. I mean, this isn't just like oh my gosh, like what's happening to our country? It's the rule, not the exception.
No, 100%. You listen, every generation tries to make it better. And then you get to a point where right now, let's look at our youth. We've raised a generation of morons that are overly liberal. And I'm not against liberal. I'm a libertarian. I'm in the middle. Okay. But we've raised this generation. I mean, where do you get protesters against Israel at major universities? They can't think for themselves. Half of them are back living at home. We don't have the entrepreneurial spirit, the capitalistic spirit to go out and get a job, work hard, build something. Now it's just, well, I can depend on the government. Maybe Biden will waive the student debt once again. Maybe he'll waive some other debts. This is the problem that you have. You go to work, get a job, get off the couch. That's what I say.
Do you see a change in trajectory as a possibility here, or are we just kind of are we going to just have to ride this out?
Well, I think this election coming up is probably one of the biggest elections in my lifetime. I mean, fortunately or unfortunately for me personally, nothing's going to change for me. I'm going to live a good life and be thrilled to live. But of course, I'm worried about my children, my grandchildren, your children, if you have them, or other people's children, because we're leaving them a hole of garbage. We are leaving them in a position that they will never get out of. And of course, what you're really allowing is you've accelerated the Chinese 100-year plan. And everybody's heard of this before. China had a 100-year plan to take over the world. Okay. Well, because of the Biden administration, because of what's going on, you are seeing exactly that. China is accumulating farmland in the United States. And let's remember, if you control the food supply, you control the world. It's more important than money. So you're allowing China to slowly creep over. You're allowing all these illegal immigrants in, which a lot of them are Chinese, and who knows what they're doing. We are allowing this to turn into a real pile of crap. And it's depressing to watch because, again, I want my children to have the same opportunity to be capitalists if they choose to be so, and make whatever they want to make. I don't think anybody should be restricted to what they should be able to earn.
Yeah, I've talked to this with a number of guests before. You're basically down to three options, and it's basically stay and try to fight in terms of your words, to argue against this, to speak out against it. You can either ignore it and just have tunnel vision, just keep trying to make money, do what you do, or you can just flee to a different country. You can just relocate. What's kind of like your outlook on this?
Well, I think you have to fight. Again, this is the problem I run into all the time. People keep saying, well, America's the greatest country. Well, it still is the greatest country. But my theory is that we're not supposed to going backwards to catch up to everybody. We're supposed to force the rest of the world to catch to us. Okay. And we've slowly becoming worse and worse and worse. I mean, look at the funding. Look at what happened to the city of San Francisco. It became a hellhole. It became garbage. People are moving out of it. Look at in Los Angeles, in the state of California, to live among the middle class, you have to make over $1 million a year. So again, we're watching big cities turn into garbage. And that's not the American way. That's not what we know. We have to fight. Now, again, I do believe there's going to be another revolution. I think this election is going to go a long way. I think that you may or may not like Donald Trump, but I do believe that he was the one politician in my lifetime that actually fought for the people, okay, without having his hands in everybody's pocket. And of course, why is the Ukraine war still going on? Because the politicians are getting paid. Again, Republican or Democrat, they're all, in my opinion, are criminals. Now, again, we could find some that I'm sure are very good politicians, but in a lump sum, our politicians are stealing our money with everything they do. The lobbyists are stealing our money with everything they do. And I think that's the problem. And if Americans don't fight and stand up for what's going on, okay, then we're going to be China. We're going to be a communist country, and you're going to be the CCP of the USA.
Yeah, fight in terms of your words, guys. I mean, the pen is mightier than the sword, obviously. Let's go ahead and shift over to the markets, Todd. What are you seeing out there in the gold and silver market? We had a massive correction over the course of the last few days. What's kind of like your thoughts on the matter?
Well, I think that they're both very good. I mean, I'm a big fan of gold and silver. I believe that, if things go the way I think they might go, we may need them for a currency again. I think that people should be buying physical metals. I mean, again, not your entire investment, but I think you need to have some representation and not paper gold or paper silver that you buy in the market, because I personally don't believe there's enough gold in the world to cover the amount of paper that is written on it. And again, if I'm right and you may need it as a currency, you'd rather have physical metals in your pocket. I think gold's going to go up and make another new high. I think silver is going to not necessarily make a new high because it's still $50. It's still quite a bit of ways. But I would expect to see gold in the 2,700 range and silver in the mid 30s. I think, again, you have to look at markets. They sell off, they rally. And of course, is how much damage they do on the way down. And there has been no damage done to the gold and silver market, even with the correction. And I think that's what you want to look at, is the amount of damage being done. And there's none. It's a natural sell-off that has not taken out the lows, that continues to find reasons to buy. And of course, as we look today, gold is up $35. And I think that, in the high 2300s, I think, I would not be surprised to see 2,700 before the end of the year.
Right. Quick side note, guys. Miles Franklin is this channel's official gold dealer. So if you want to get special pricing on gold and silver, be sure to email them at info@milesfranklin.com and tell them that Capital Cosm sent you in the subject line. You'll get special prices that you're not going to find on the website. There's no commitment necessary. Check them out. You've got nothing to lose. All right, Todd, let's get back right into it. There's a talk. I mean, there's talk of hard landings, soft landings. What camp are you really in? And if a hard landing does occur, what does this portend to the gold and silver price? You look back at the COVID crash, which is a crash that took all but a week or so. But nonetheless, gold fell with it. What are some support levels that you see for gold and silver should we have a hard landing? And then number two is, are you in a hard landing camp? Are you in a soft landing camp? Well, what do you see moving forward?
I've been in the camp, just let's be clear. I mean, I'm always full disclosure. I've been in the camp that we're going to have a 50 to 70% haircut. Okay. But I've been in this camp for a while. So it's not like I just said it yesterday. I don't think it'll be this year, or at least unless something happens with the banking system, as we saw in 2008. Election years are very challenging. Now, in 2008, when Paulson came out in September and on Face Nation said the banks were safe and sound, you knew there was a problem. Now, if we get that kind of thing, then we could have a problem this year. But I think they're going to try to hide from it and continue to try to prop up the market. Now, we've had this promise of rate cuts for a year, and they're going to be in March, they're going to be in June, and now they're going to be in September. And I'm saying no rate cuts. I think there's a more probability of a rate hike because of the high inflation. I don't think gold's going below 2,300. And I don't think silver is going to go below 28. I mean, that would be my bottoms. And look, remember, if we do get this hard sell, which I believe we're going to get, and again, I'm not saying, I have no idea when it is, okay? But I do believe we're going to get it. When it comes, it's going to take every asset class down with it initially, because when people panic, they sell everything. And unfortunately, when people sell, they start selling the good stuff first, which would be gold and silver. And that's what takes it down. But what we've seen is that immediate rebounds back up. After the panic is over, you'll see the real assets that have real strength start to move on. And I think that, again, we get what I'm looking for. Gold and silver will take it on the chin in the near term, but there'll be excellent buys going forward into the future.
Yeah. So do you still see a rate hike coming down the pike? I was just looking at the CME Fed tool, and
it's 100% price in that there's a cut in September. I told anybody I'll take 8-1. That's a 10-1 favorite. I'll take 8-1 for money. Okay. Again, I could be wrong. This is, listen, this is a metric in which they use, and it's fairly accurate at predicting. But again, that can change tomorrow. How can we cut rates if inflation is still well over their 2%? Okay. How can they cut rates if the economy is as strong as they tell us it is? It's not, but they keep telling us how strong it is. So give me a legitimate reason other than political or that we're in a recession that they can actually cut rates in September.
Could we already be in a recession?
I think we are. But again, they're not admitting to it. They're telling us how strong the economy is. So again, if you're going to keep telling me how strong it is and your inflation is still rising, I mean, the inflation numbers we get from the government don't account for food and energy. Only 4% of that entire metric is food and energy. The average consumer, other than an emergency, spends well more than 4% of their paycheck on food and energy, depending, again, unless you have an emergency. So at the end of the day, the metric is wrong. Inflation is much higher than the 3% that they're admitting to. I would say inflation is still north of 10 or 12%.
Right. How do you measure inflation? If we're to take the CPI not at its word, what are some measures that you look at to kind of gauge what the true inflation rate is?
Well, how about when you go to the grocery store or the gas station? Okay. Look, I urge everybody, forget about listening to the government numbers. Look at your own spending. Look at how much money you have left over after your paycheck. Okay. If you used to be able to save some money and now you're living paycheck to paycheck, I think inflation is probably pretty high. And I think that's what we seem to forget. Too many people are dependent on what they hear on the news versus what is happening to them directly. Okay. Again, I urge you to check your own savings account. If you cannot afford to be putting money away where you were able to in the past, that tells you that the cost of living is way too high. Mortgage rates are way too high. Now, they're really not way too high. I mean, I paid 13% for my first mortgage and had no problem making the payment. I think that we got spoiled and the younger generation never knew what real rates were. Okay. I mean, mortgage rates were as high as 17, 18% at one time. And it's not that long ago. So again, we got into this feed free money. We've gone against the entire system of what capitalism and the economy is about. But of course, that goes back to 1913 when the Federal Reserve was created, because there was a group of criminals of Paul Warburg, Rothschilds, JP Morgan, and Rockefellers who developed this whole thing so they could actually filter the money out and make the dollar worthless. I mean, this has been going on since the 1600s in England. Do you think that their economy is so good? No, it's not, because again, we allow these banks to do things that they have no business doing. We should be living in a free market society where price discovery determines what the price of an asset class is. Price discovery derives the interest rate, not the Federal Reserve, because that is so far off their mandate that it's not even funny.
Why do you think they're looking to move away from the Federal Reserve and implement a kind of like a global central bank that they've alluded to, a central bank digital currency, essentially doing away with the commercial banking system? You would think that would be that would go against the commercial banks that have a stake in the Federal Reserve.
Well, they would benefit from a globalization. What do they care? Listen, this whole fiat currency system is a scam anyways. You have nothing backing any currency except the full faith and credit of the government. Well, I certainly don't have too much faith or full. They're full of it, not full faith. So when I look at what they do, I mean, this has been basically a race to zero. I never understood, maybe you can explain, you're a pretty smart guy, why we worry about how strong the dollar is. So for our exports, okay, it doesn't make sense to me that I have to have a weaker dollar to be able to export more product. Isn't that the same thing as cutting my price down? Okay, my dollar is buying less. again, the fiat currency system, since we went through the Bretton Woods Act and we went off the gold standard, has become nothing but a big scam of garbage and a bunch of stuff that allows the banking system to take more money. Because not only does the Federal Reserve create money, the banks create money by the fractional banking system of allowing them to lend out 10-1. And if you're borrowing from the Fed window, okay, so if I go to the Fed window as JP Morgan, I borrow $1 million. Okay, I can magically turn that liability into an asset and then lend out $10 million against that $1 million I borrowed. So I have zero risk, okay, to what I borrowed. I'm now lending out 10 times that. Again, and when they went into COVID, remember, they lifted that 10-1 restriction to basically unlimited. These banks, I will guarantee you, could not pass a legitimate stress test. If I send in a real accounting firm that went through their books, they would not pass the test. But we listen to the Fed because, of course, this is the scam in which we're living in.
Yeah, there's all sorts of ways that they siphon money off of the average citizen. Take the income tax, for example. They adjust the income tax brackets based off the CPI number, but if the CPI number is underreported, then they're effectively putting you in a tax bracket that you shouldn't really be in based off prior history. So, like, if you're making $100,000 in the year 2000, it's not the same as making $100,000 in the year 2024. But if the tax brackets aren't adjusted correctly, they're taxing you at that same rate as you would have in 2000. Right.
And you're also forgetting about what they call the hidden tax of inflation.
Yep.
The excise tax, the federal tax you pay on products that you buy. When the prices are higher, you're actually paying more taxes. Okay. Again, look, government as it sits today is nothing but a scam. Okay. It doesn't do anything for the people. It does everything for the benefit of themselves and the government that it runs. Okay. Again, and I'm not picking a side here because both sides are equally guilty, okay, at what they're trying to do, which is why we need to have a serious change in government because we're so far from the overall Constitution. Government jobs weren't meant to be careers. When you go back to when the farmers ran this country, guys would go serve a couple of terms or a term and go back to work on the farm. Okay. They weren't there as a career. Now you have a career. Well, why would somebody invest $40 million of their own money to get elected to a $200,000 a year job? So you've got a question you got to ask yourself sometimes. Yeah,
it's a good question too. What would it take to kind of, you have this $35 trillion debt overhang in the sovereign debt, and then you've got $100 trillion plus in the unfunded liabilities. How can you turn the ship around given all that debt burden?
Well, I mean, I think the best way is if the debt goes up, the politicians get voted out of office, okay? And we bring in a new set of politicians. It's got to start there because they control the rules. They control what's going on. I really think that there needs to be term limits on all offices. I think we need to turn over. I mean, look at the decrepit old people that we have in office, okay? Why are they still in office? Why is Bernie Sanders still in office? I mean, that man had never had a job in his life. Joe Biden never had a job in his life. He's been a career politician that's got 177 bank accounts. So again, we need to bring in new blood, fresh blood. We need to turn away. We need to redesign the system and actually get back on target with what the Constitution is and start lowering our debt. If you or I lived like the government lives, we'd be in bankruptcy court or jail.
Yeah. Well, is gold an inflation hedge in your mind, Todd?
No. I look at gold as a hard asset that you're going to need. Okay. I believe that everybody should have some representation, 5 to 10% of their net worth in gold and silver, and that's physical, not paper. Again, a hedge is hedge. I think the only true hedge is if you have a derivative that you can actually hedge against the product you're using, which, like, for example, I'm always 100% invested in the stock market, but I'm perfectly hedged using derivatives around my portfolio. So I only have a maximum of 3 to 4% risk should the bottom of the world fall out. And I think that's really if you're looking for a protection against inflation, those are the ways you protect against inflation. Gold, again, I do believe that there's a chance that it may be needed as a currency again. So that's my concern there. And I do think it will continue to rise. Just the stock market has risen 8.5% per year since the inception and 10% year over year since 1950. So there's been no better single greater investment than the stock market in history. But again, we may need gold and silver, and I believe in owning hard assets just like you own a home. That's a hard asset, and I think that hard assets are valuable because they can be used in barter systems and other things that you may need when things really get rough. And at some point, they're going to really get rough around it.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you see as gold's true function, though? If it's not an inflation hedge, then what is it? A crisis hedge? Is it just like insurance?
Gold is a form of currency. It's a way to store wealth in something that will appreciate. I mean, gold continues to appreciate since in history as well. I mean, again, and it is something for an emergency. You know, listen, if there's a run on the banks, okay, and the stock market collapses, what are you going to use? Okay. You have gold, you have silver, you have assets that have value, very similar to what Bitcoin, I think, is turning into. The cryptocurrency world, okay, I think is also a form of stored asset. So,
yeah. So you mentioned that the possibility of gold becoming the backing of another currency sometime down the line. Would that be, like what exactly kind of do you?
I don't know if it'll be a backing. I think it may be the actual currency.
The actual currency. Okay.
I think you may look, and that's one thing I will also tell people. Is what I tell my people. If you're going to buy gold, as I recommend, don't buy big bars. Okay. Buy small quantities that can be broken down, because if you really do need it for a currency, nobody's going to make change for 100-ounce bar of gold. Okay. I mean, you may think that I'm goofy, but you got to think like that. You have to have scrap silver, because again, if we really get into that position, and I think there's a chance you can get into that position, okay, then you're going to need to be able to use that to buy food potentially. And again, I don't want anybody to think I'm calling the end of the world. Okay. I just want to be prepared. And my gold and my silver, I know is going to appreciate whether I need to use it as a currency or not. I know in my safe, it's going to appreciate. So when I drop that and I leave it to my kids, they can go sell.
Are you in the market for gold and silver? Then if so, please consider Miles Franklin. They are my gold and silver dealer of choice. So not only do they have super competitive prices that you're going to have a really hard time finding elsewhere, but then they also have top-notch customer support. I know Andy Schechtman, the owner of Miles Franklin, top-notch guy. I wouldn't be recommending them to you if I didn't have faith in their product. But what you really want to do, however, you want to email them at info@milesfranklin.com, and you want to say that Capital Cosmos sent me in the description line, because when you do that, you can get access to their special pricing sheet. You want to get that special pricing sheet because you're going to get special prices that you won't find on the website itself. So email them at info@milesfranklin.com. Tell them that Capital Cosmos sent you, and you won't be heckled with spam emails, etc. There's no commitment necessary. I promise you that. And with that said, I will let you get back to the video.
But I think that it's a valuable I think hard assets are valuable because they're something you can hold, and they're money in your pocket, the same as real cash. If the cash has any value, that's another story. How much more devaluation of the currency? People throw around $100 bills now like they threw around singles 30 years ago.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and pivot over to energy while we still have time. Oil's kind of been in this $70 to $80 zone despite all of this insanity going on around the world. Why is oil relatively stable given war in Ukraine, war in the Middle East, potential for war in
I don't think
South China Sea, etc.?
I don't think the Middle East has. I don't think Ukraine has anything to do with it. And I think, first of all, we have enough oil of our own oil. Number one. Mm-hmm. But I do think, because we have gone to Saudi Arabia, if you're Saudi Arabia, or if you're another nation away from the United States, who would you rather see in office? A Joe Biden administration or Kamala Harris now, or Donald Trump? Okay. Who would you rather see in office? And certainly, they would rather see the Joe Biden administration or Kamala Harris now than Trump, because when Trump was in office, there were terrorists, you had somebody to answer to. And I don't think there'd be a Ukraine-Russia conflict if there was a Donald Trump in the White House before. So I think that Saudi Arabia is keeping prices lower to try to help this administration get reelected. Okay. Again, I got a lot of conspiracy theories. So I think that they're trying to help them get reelected, because why would you want strong leadership? I mean, I'm a believer. If it's me, I'd like to make the United States an island. Okay, we don't need anybody. Okay, all we're missing in this country are some of the rare earth materials. Okay, we don't need to be with anybody. We could be self-sufficient without any other country in the world. Okay, and I'm not saying we should shut off the rest of the world, but I'm tired of feeding the rest of the world at the cost of our own natural resources, at the cost of our own lives, at the cost of our own money, while you allow the border to be flooded by illegals.
Yeah. So, Todd, what I've been doing over the course of the last several interviews is I've been opening the door for my guest to ask a question to my next guest. And so I've got a question for you. And this is from Joel Scalzo. Do you know who he is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So his question to you was,
what's the deep state, next move?
Oh, they're going to try to steal this election again. I mean, that's for sure. They're going to. They stole the last election, in my opinion. Okay. And again, I'm not going to go. I haven't talked about it since it happened. Okay. I let it go, but they're going to try to steal this election. They are trying to bring in globalism because it only benefits them. Okay. They are running the country. They are confiscating, in a term, all of the money, all the things that are going on. And I think that the deep state has to be stopped. And I don't know that they can be stopped. They are so powerful. I mean, look at the people that are in there. I'm not going to mention names, but you know the names. We all know the names of who are involved. And again, it's a really of crisis proportions that if we allow them to steal another election, if Kamala Harris wins it straight up, hey, I got no problem. But I don't think that in 2020, when Donald Trump got the second most votes of all time and had a big lead in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden that lead disappeared and they started finding ballots other places, I think that the deep state's going to try to steal this election as well.
all right. Well, what's the question you'd like to ask my next guest?
Your next guest, I'd like to know what they think of the overall United States of America, and are we still the greatest nation in the world?
All right. Good question. Also, as well, Todd, what I've also been asking is to name a book or two that you'd recommend the audience read that you think would make them a better investor.
Well,
or just in general.
I don't know if it'll make you a better investor, but I urge everybody to read The Creature from Jekyll Island, which was the start of the Federal Reserve. That's where the Fed was started. And again, a lot of things that I talk about come from that book. I think it's great. And I have written a couple of books on options. If anybody wants them, they can have them for free on a PDF file. It was just email me and I'll send them to them.
Nice. We'll also have the link down below if they want a physical copy, if they're interested. All right, Todd, anything else you want to talk about before you wrap things up? Anything that you didn't get a chance to talk about you want to
I think just if you're an investor, be a diligent investor. Okay. Don't get too crazy. Don't get over leveraged, and don't listen to the news. Don't panic. Be prepared for whatever comes next. Okay. And don't put yourself in too deep into buying anything, because if you get over leveraged, you are sure to fail.
Fantastic. Todd, where can people find you?
BubbaTrading.com, or they can email me directly if they have questions at Bubba@BubbaTrading.com.
Great. Well, if you guys enjoyed this interview, be sure to write down below, go Bubba go. Go Bubba go in the comment section. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And also, please consider Miles Franklin as your gold dealer of choice. They are my gold dealer of choice. You mentioned scrap silver and everything. They got all of that. You've got to email them at info@milesfranklin.com and tell them that Capital Cosm sent you to get their special pricing sheet that you're not going to find on the website. Special prices you're not going to find on the website. There's no commitment necessary. They're not going to, spam you with emails, etc. So I can guarantee you that. And with that said, you guys, I will catch you in the next episode. Bye, y'all.